The Minnesota Wild fired the first volley in the week before the trade deadline as they acquired Gustav Nyquist. Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild is here to talk about the deal, what it means for Minnesota, and what else may be coming down the pike. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Locked On NHL Podcast Monday edition. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Great to welcome back to the show a familiar face and voice to Locked On NHL fans, Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild. And Seth, the Wild got out in front of everybody in the week before the trade deadline. Gustav Nyquist added to the mix. What does he provide, and how did he look in his Wild debut on Sunday?
Well, the interesting thing, Gil, is I think as interesting as the Nyquist acquisition was, some of Bill Guerin's comments were almost as interesting. I'll get to those in a little bit. But as far as Gustav Nyquist goes, I think what he represents is a known commodity. Now, if you look at the year that he was having this year, obviously not as successful as he had with Nashville last year. Pretty much a career high across the board, not in the goals department, but in the points department. He had a fantastic season for the Predators. Not having as great of a season this year, but get in line. Who on Nashville is actually having a good year? He represents somebody that can slot into a top six role for this Minnesota Wild team and actually play that role. Is actually somebody that is a top six player. I have been almost mystified by the fact that a recent waiver wire pickup, Vinny Hinostroza, has played his way in just a short time, played his way into, top 6 minutes, number one spot on the power play. I know people are out, but there just are so many players that it seems like are underperforming and are playing above where they normally slot in the lineup, that this represents an opportunity for Bill Guerin to go get somebody that he can essentially plug and play. You know that Nyquist is going to give you some solid offensive upside. He's pretty smart with the puck. He is great on the penalty kill as well, which is a dire need for the Minnesota Wild, but his addition will fill up a top six spot and will prevent somebody else in that lineup having to stretch to that spot and kind of play out of position too.
How did he look in his debut on Sunday afternoon?
He looked fine. I mean, he was helping push the puck up the ice. He contributed to a penalty kill that was perfect against the Boston Bruins. So not a bad debut for Nyquist, and he played on the top line with Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi. So just step right in. He said it was good to be back, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the next game goes.
Now, you mentioned the comments by Bill Guerin. What did he say, and what are you taking from it?
Well, this is interesting because you would think that if you didn't have really any idea on a timetable for particular players, that it might behoove you to put them on long-term injured reserve and utilize that cap space. Bill Guerin is not sure when Kirill Kaprizov or Joel Eriksson Ek are going to be back, but the thing that he is adamant about is that he thinks they will be back before the regular season is done. So basically, we're just in kind of a holding pattern. So as far as acquisitions go, this might be it for the Minnesota Wild. But, I was looking the other day when Joel Eriksson Ek got hurt, and I had heard one of the timetables was potentially 6 to 8 weeks. 6 weeks puts you in the middle of April, which is basically the end of the regular season. So if that's the short term, it probably would behoove you to utilize that money and go the route that so many other teams have gone, where then once the postseason starts, you say, oh, hey, turns out he's okay. Turns out Kirill Kaprizov is just healed up magically and able to get back out on the ice and help this team. But for whatever reason, it seems like the Wild aren't going to do that. And the latest update we had on Kirill Kaprizov was that he's going to be out longer than expected, whatever that means. I'm getting kind of frustrated by the just level of mysticism around something that a doctor tells you after a procedure is done. Hey, you're going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, we think this player is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. We'll reevaluate at that point. But instead, all we get is, well, it is an injury, and it's going to be at some point between now and the end of the regular season. Like, there just is a lot of vagueness, and I kind of feel I'm going to be fascinated to see how this plays out, because if they don't come back, if Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson don't come back before the regular season is done, this is going to feel like a really missed opportunity.
They can go on LTIR and come off before the season ends. I mean, you have to miss 10 games minimum, and what is it, 23 days or something like that? I mean, there are cap ramifications depending on who else may or may not be added. Why the hesitation to save a little cap space and to put these players on LTIR, even if they are coming back before the season ends?
Well, that's the thing that Bill Guerin has been so adamant about. And Kirill Kaprizov, actually looking at Puckpedia, is actually already on long-term injured reserve, but he's been adamant about, well, we're not going to use that cap space because we anticipate that he'll be back before the end of the regular season. Well, you've got like 20 games. So when is that going to be? Is that going to be a week from now? Is it going to be 2 weeks from now? Is that going to be at the end of March? Like, what is the timetable? I think a lot of people just kind of get frustrated by well, he'll come back when he's ready. Like, it's not that you don't go to the doctor and have a procedure done, and the doctor says, well, I'll call you when you're good to go. That's not how that process works. Like, they tell you, okay, it's going to be this amount of time, and then you can maybe do this. Maybe you could do this. Like, it feels like, it kind of, to me, feels like there is a possibility that these guys don't return, and that we're getting a little bit of bet hedging here to, well, we hope they come back, to then all of a sudden have it turn around at the end of the season like, well, we thought they were going to come back, but they didn't. Well, what do you want us to do?
Do we maybe learn more about the timetable at the trade deadline based on what Bill Guerin does or does not do?
I would hope so, because this whole thing with Kaprizov started the game after Christmas, when it was, hey, we're going to hold him out. He's a little banged up, is what fans were told. He's a little banged up. We're going to hold him out just to make sure that he's right. And then all of a sudden it's, well, he's going to need surgery. He's going to miss probably at least 4 weeks. And then all of a sudden now he's going to miss longer than we expected. Like, what? When can we expect for him to come back? That's all I want to know.
If the Wild make another move, what do you think they're looking for?
Well, I think either penalty kill help or another top 6 forward, I think, are probably the two biggest items on the agenda. And it'll be interesting to see too, because now Jonas Brodin got hurt a game ago, and it sounds like he might be out for. Well, actually, I think it was announced that he's going to be week to week, whatever that means. So I would say penalty kill help, which would likely be a forward or a center, and maybe another top 6 would probably be on the wish list. Obviously, there are all the Brock Nelson links, but that seems like that's less and less likely. The interesting one is going to be Vancouver. Does Brock Besser decide that he wants out of a ship that seems like it's starting to take on some water? That's going to be the one to watch, I think.
Going to be fascinating to see how this plays out and whether we get any more information out of Bill Guerin. Seth, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find Locked On Wild on all of your favorite social media platforms at Locked On Wild. And you can also follow me on X at Seth, TOUPS, for all of your favorite Minnesota Wild notes, musings, and other Minnesota sports as well. We will continue to keep you up to date on all things Minnesota Wild here as we move down the stretch.
Seth, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com.